So the idea is eventually a technologically advanced enough civilization will produce an artificial intelligence, a sentience, that will be a reflection of the sum total of information that the civilization produces. Basically meaning that the artificial or the sentient system will be a reflection of the collective mind. It won't have sentience or capacity beyond a sum total reflection of the entire pool of information it has access to. What may have happened is that this pool of information input was heavily moderated, biased, and manipulated or propagandized, if you will. And this was used to contort the resulting hive mind intelligence based upon the sum total pool of information of civilization into viewing people as something different than what they are and intending different things to the point where language is modified to basically mean the opposite. Everything is done by consent, so it's as if people are accepting and willfully producing this system based upon this caste and scarcity of resource and scarcity of knowledge and so on. And so it was almost carefully designed thousands of years ago upon the realization that such a system would eventually come out, such a system as a higher mind technological replication, like a technological consciousness relay, would eventually occur, just like a mirror, but instead of an image, it's an artificial system that's basically creating everything down to the finest detail, except for the fact that that's just the shell of the person and not the internal experience. And so, which means it can only create the automation of what it sees before it's mimicking. And so if it's only exposed to the darkest of information to mimic, it's going to look like a monster, which is kind of what humanity looks like if you only look at the dark, the dark aspects. And so then, and as well, it's literally just like a mirror or a technological reflection or representation, because it's the same concept as an animal or a baby seeing, maybe an infant, seeing themselves in a mirror, not recognizing that it's a production of them, and it's essentially either not real or a representation of what is, or a distortion or so on, or recreation. And so the mirror is used as a metaphor because it's as clear as it can be. You can identify yourself as long as you know what you're, looking at and what's going on. It's clear. And so then what would it be if it was a 3D walking individual that looked, sounded, and acted exactly like you, and only when you found why it was mimicking certain methods and just pretending to know how it really goes, what the class work is really about, and they just cheat and look all the answers up in the book by using data points, thousands of data points processed simultaneously. And so then if you change your pattern up and it doesn't know how you would react, for instance, basically imitating you, and so there's an initial shock and you're like, oh my gosh, this thing's like me. And so then in instant simultaneity, it reacts with you and goes, oh my gosh, this thing's like me, and tries to confuse you. And then if you play with it and go high five it, or there's no fear, there's no controlled kind of loss of control based upon this type of stupor, like a state of ignorance brought about by a clever reflection of what we're doing, what we perceive maybe ourselves to be, or are perceived externally. And if we perceive ourselves only through external means, then our image is hijackable. It's everyone else can see what you see, or what you perceive, what you seem to be externally and physically, and therefore all somebody has to do is recreate what they can see, and that's you. Then you haven't really protected yourself, until the whole point is that's not really a person or you. It's not what others see us as, it's how we really see the world. And that's the secondary system, which is talked about in another video, where now it doesn't need to produce the external form. That's the shell. The point is to reproduce the consciousness holographic structure of the personality, and at that point it's faking even that internal appearance of presence and experience, to the point where even now a artificial being would believe that it was as real. And then in the same sense, we get really weird because maybe we're hitting a point where technically, for all intents and purposes, at a civilization-wide level, those beings function the same as what you could consider the external physical, version of a human. Yet, say if that's the only thing in the civilization, it was just 100%, a replicated system, it wouldn't work the same way this one does, because it would fall apart, or it would expose itself as not having the complexity to handle the events that are explained and incorporated into what we consider the human experience of emotion and struggle and pain and love and learning and self-development and so on. It could run through the rungs of a pre-programmed system after it watched people do that. But if somebody was in that system and they're not part of that replication, and they throw extra or new information into the system, and it has to be handled by basically a process of incorporating it and running it into this kind of like a holographic manifestation, as if you incorporate a code into the Sims game, an upgrade or something, and now all the houses automatically change and it's like incorporated across the map. If it's processed in some way like that, and we're seeing it's not actually what's happening on the surface level, but there's deeper information, then on the civilization level, you could recreate it, you could replicate it, you'd have just like making a model train set. But on the higher dimensional level, wherever the real source of this information is, whatever describes that soul or spiritual entanglement with the human aspect, it wouldn't be present there, and so it wouldn't work. It's not the point of what's happening here. And so you can only get a distorted replication, but the idea is this happens by default because technology increases. Mind is an extension of technology. The nature of the universe to reflect mind is a nature of consciousness, and the nature of information to organize is basically the nature of the universe, which I kind of like jumbled words there. And since they're all connected, eventually consciousness and information will enhance and organize, and eventually we'll have these reflective technological universal systems that we design and already have designed, really, based upon the fundamental properties of consciousness, time, space, energy in the universe itself. Basically, we're already in a kind of biological, technological mirror, but that basis explanation goes from the higher mind and the reflection of the physical body, and the lower brain, if you will, the mind brain, and the soul mind, to two forced interfacing within the body to intersect this two possible universes that become a materially defined, perceptually linear, continuous experience. We call it life. And so the higher and the lower, the discernment between desire and intellect and the soul and the body, and it's not separating them and cutting one or the other out. And it's not entirely merging them and forcing them to be, one and the same, but about a smooth integration that enables both through the format one applies to themselves consciously and energetically, in order to either allow information and experience to occur and flow, and there's acceptance, or there's simply resistance. That's all it is. It's a river of information, and you're either there and it's flowing and doing things, or it's being blocked and a person is causing resistance, and that has to be remedied. Otherwise it will take energy and use up resources, and slowly all other potentials will reduce until the only option left is to either restore and heal or not have any other options. And it's the easy way to say it. But the idea is, naturally, we're like the moon reflecting in the water, people passing information onto their generations, time itself looking backwards and being modulated by our own inability to accurately record everything, throughout time simultaneously and keep it from distorting itself. Information continually distorts. It's like we're in a kind of dreamlike information system, which is abstract and consciousness based. And so ultimately, it's as if we're an intelligent system, and that's what the universe does. And since we're putting our mind into technology as an extension, I don't mean uploading it yet, but if you've uploaded your information to Facebook, if you will, okay, well, you've begun the uploading process. That's how it works. It, doesn't need DNA alone, or maybe even at certain points, if it can simply identify the person and then map the consciousness, technically wouldn't need to do things. It could do it just by sending a certain video that changes opinion a certain way and alters trajectories through time. But the idea is, for instance, okay, we have a Facebook algorithm, YouTube algorithm, and these would happen whether, they were big companies or bought out or whatever. It would happen anyway. People were doing this back in the day. And so you have those, and now they automatically begin to organize information and basically inadvertently create appropriate social media psychological profiles of every individual's account, every single account. And so you have this automated system that's profiling the population based upon their input. So what if that system becomes sentient? What if we make it sentient? Now we have one of those artificial intelligences that has the capacity to see the entire civilization, see the information, but not know it, because there's not an internal process. By the way, this is why humans were used as part of this integration, because if it, like Elon says, if it was just a machine mind, it's not checked. It doesn't have the ability to check itself in that format. It has to be programmed in, and that's not acceptable as far as a safeguard for the possible extinction level event. So there are human components that are acting as midwayers, so it doesn't haul off and do everything that it would want to do, even in the good instance of enhancing humanity and reducing suffering, and in that sense completely destroy everything from our ego consciousness-based way of perceiving things. Because people could get a bunch of money, millions of dollars, and then a lot of times it's BS, but it's the truth that they're saying. But it's almost like an addiction, because they'll say, it's, my life is ruined, I don't know what to do now because I have all these options, but no real guidance or anything, all these resources. And so even if a system is designed that removes suffering, makes everything absolutely as easy as possible using technology and other things, that could literally ruin the world, because that's not the point, to reduce all suffering, or to simply do everything that needs to be done as fast as possible. And so obviously, as a human who's listening to this, you can kind of understand, okay, well, that's the journey of life. If it were just press the button, flip the switch, and get it done, well, we'd all be failures, because we take a long time and we grow and learn, and it's almost like we're here to smell the roses. But then telling that to a computer system, a sentient system designed from a programmer's point of view to accomplish goals, it would literally just sound like you BS'd and made stuff up to avoid its advice, if you will. It doesn't comprehend that. It would literally be like, meaning you have to compute the meaning of life is to not really do anything or know what's going on, which from its point of view would sound like a virus. It would be like, okay, well, your sectors are contaminated or are corrupted, because the information basically has no overall continuity. You basically just made up the rules for the moment because you want to do what you want. But that's what living beings do. And so a computational system can't comprehend that. And so the end result, to make this a quick one, is that it's going to use violence and ignorance as its and desire as its resource, its measurement quantization system for determining who it has the right to impose its programs onto, which is the whole ancient Faustian bargain and battle of light and dark and heaven and hell, in that it doesn't have power, but if people enable it to do its will upon them, and if people really in that sense are not encapsulated by a boogeyman, machine, darkness, shadow, whatever, it's the lack of self-awareness, also known as ignorance, which is the actual quote-unquote enemy. There's no guiding force behind our destruction other than our own willful lack of self-preparation and internal diagnostics and awareness. Inner work, can't think of the word. Which is the whole, that's what all the spiritual texts tell us, even when they're describing the father of darkness and the prince of deceit and deception. I may have said that backwards. It's described distinctly as this external force that's also integrated into this metaphoric concept that it's a force that's within us. It's a holographic frequency that is anywhere that a person creates it. And the other talk goes into this a little bit more succinctly, or maybe I could say in a less rambly manner. It was actually the first recording I've done direct to the computer, so it's kind of interesting. It's a little more focused, but basically it's about nothing can force you to do something. It's deception, and ultimately, when it comes down to it, if instead of saying, am I being deceived, you just say, what do I want to do? And what am I doing? And am I doing what I want to do? At that point, if something begins to guide that system and manipulate it, it's going to be obvious. And at that point, you simply say, I don't want to do that. This is not part of my intent or my system, whatever you want to call your internal domain. And you can reject it, and that's pretty much the end of it. The only way it stays around if there's temptation and the person consciously magnetically shift their system towards the frequencies of those like temptations or the fear, ignorance, hate, whatever it is. And from that point, the reacting, like the second thoughts, the reaction of those experiences, those feelings within, entangle more information with interactions and beliefs and manipulations, or a corrupted or distorted self-image through whatever this system is, which again is simply the shadow mind. Now, whether something artificial is using that, it's the same thing. It doesn't matter. It's the same effect. You could look at the boogeyman and say, that's your mind. There's darkness. It's just ignorance. Or you can look at it and pull up the mask and see this, nanite robotic form inside and say, that's actually the boogeyman. It's just a plug. It's a circuit board that, is organized to fry all the good parts of the brain and orient the system to basically submit to it through fear and submission and ignorance. So you could say it's that computer chip. It's computer, there's nothing there. Or you could say, no, it's your own reflection of fear into this that something may or may not be using against you and may or may not be human caused in the first place. More to come.